Blog Talk Radio.
Franchise interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia. You're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews. Welcome to Franchise Interviews, an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship. Listen to interviews with franchisers, franchisees, franchise authors, franchise experts, and attorneys. And now, welcome your host, Marty McDermott, and Franchise Interviews.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Franchise Interviews, where for over 15 years now, we've been asking the entrepreneurs one-on-one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott. I'm the president of Franchise Interviews, and we have a great show today. We're welcoming back Jon Ostenson, and Jon is a consultant, owner, investor, and author of the new book, Non-Food Franchising. Jon draws on his experience as a former Inc. 500 franchise president and multi-brand franchisee in serving his clients. We're going to talk to Jon about that in just a moment on Franchise Interviews. So stick around because we have a great show.
Franchisers, are you looking to reach aspiring entrepreneurs looking to buy a franchise? Are you looking to reach a highly educated audience on franchising? Years, Franchise Interviews has been giving an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship through our website, franchiseinterviews.com, where you can hear and read interviews as well as get tips from some of the most successful sources in franchising. Our weekly franchise radio show where each week you get to hear a new interview with franchisers, franchisees, franchise authors, franchise experts, and attorneys, and our podcast, Great Quotes in Franchising. For more information, go to franchiseinterviews.com or call us at 610-905-2919. That's 610-905-2919.
Hi, this is Connie McDermott, Administrative Assistant for Franchise Interviews, LLC, and you're listening to Franchise Interviews.
Franchise Interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia. You're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to a very special edition of Franchise Interviews, where for over 15 years now, we've been asking the entrepreneurs one-on-one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott. I'm the president of Franchise Interviews, and as we were saying earlier, we have a great show today. We're welcoming back Jon Ostenson, and Jon is a consultant, owner, investor, and author of the new book, Non-Food Franchising. And Jon draws on his experience as a former Inc. 500 franchise president and multi-brand franchise in serving his clients. Hi, Jon. Welcome back to the show.
Marty, great to be back. Appreciate you having me on and look forward to our conversation.
Oh, me too, Jon. It's great to have you back as well. I want to first, I think last time I had you on the show, I think we were even talking about this, but, your new book. So I want to congratulate you on the new book. It's called Non-Food Franchising. And I thought, maybe that's probably a good place to start, Jon. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, thanks so much, Marty. And, the book just released last week, and we've had a great response already. And as we've discussed in the past, oftentimes when people think franchising, they think fast food. And yet I would say over 95% of my clients are looking for something outside of food. And granted, I am grateful for those that do get into food. We certainly need them. But for many, that's just not the right fit. So, in the book, Non-Food Franchising, as it describes, we really get into the nuts and bolts stepping into business ownership. We talk about topics such as franchising versus startups. Franchising is not right for everyone, as we've talked about in the past. But franchising versus startups, franchising versus this idea of entrepreneurship through acquisition. What are the pros and cons? We talk about the owner-operator and the executive model and the semi-passive model of ownership. We talk about different types of opportunities in different industries, and then we get into the financials, both on the potential revenue and profit side, but then also the funding and how do you go about the funding of the franchise. And then very importantly, we talk about how do you select the right franchise. And as you can imagine, and as you know, as an industry insider, every brand is going to put their best foot forward out there on their website, but you really have to get behind the scenes and understand the franchisor and their background and their leadership team, and what are those barriers to entry in which they operate within their industry, and do they have true competitive advantages? And so we get into all of that, and we work with over brands. With FranBridge, we're affiliated with IFPG, and so we get this great perspective. And I'd say at any given time, there's probably 40 or 50 that we feel are the best of the best. And we can certainly get into the reasons why. But no, finally, we dig into long-term strategies. Getting into franchising as business ownership. Are you looking to build a portfolio, or are you looking to expand, within a given brand into multiple markets down the road? And so we talk about different paths that clients of ours have taken that we've seen prove to be successful.
What was the process of writing the book for you, John? Because I've never written a book before, but I sense for you it was probably, I don't want to use the word easy, because I don't think it's ever easy to write a book, but I mean, here you have all this experience and all these different stories. What was that experience like for you in writing the book?
Yeah, it was a labor of love, I would say.
Yes.
The world doesn't slow down for you. In fact, it only speeds up, when you're taking on a big project. So, it's still, our business continues to grow on the consulting side, in a very big way. And then, I've got a young family and all these other constraints, but, it involves waking up early on Saturday and Sunday mornings and just putting together the content and punching it out. And I did work with some really good partners, ghostwriters that kind of help pull the content together, make it make sense, and great, publishers. So, didn't do it all myself, but the content was all for me. And no, it wasn't hard to generate the content. It was just pulling it together. There's so many steps to get it across the finish line. So, great experience though.
That's great. You were talking earlier, John, in giving kind of like some of the highlights in the book, and I know you talk about, the franchise option. I thought maybe, you can give us a few reasons why franchises are often a stronger option than, some entrepreneurs consider startups, or some entrepreneurs consider, acquisitions, buying another business. Maybe you could talk about, why franchising then.
Acquisition side, a lot of our clients come to us and say, hey, we want to buy an existing business that's known in the market, that has a team in place and existing cash flow. And that sounds great on paper. And, granted, there are only so many businesses out there that really check all the boxes once you dig under the cover. But there's risk to that as well. What if your key staff leave the day after? I mean, whenever you have a change in ownership, you're going to have some upheaval. What if you have, key customers leave? I mean, stuff that you wouldn't know, prior to signing on the dotted line for the deal, and then all of a sudden you may be alone. You don't have that franchisor and the support. So I think it's just fair for people to weigh both sides of it. Certainly, I'm biased. I do feel that the franchising is a better path to business ownership, especially compared to startups. I actually put together a top 10 list in the book on, franchising versus startups. And, we get into things like, you're really starting with that proven model. You've got the support of the coach on the sidelines with that franchisor. We talk about, other franchisees in the system and how oftentimes best practices are generated. I mean, this is something I've seen throughout my career is, gaining the wisdom from others and being able to contribute back. And, we just hit on a number of different things, which I won't belabor the point because I know your audience notices all of these very well. And we talk about, being able to go with eyes wide open with item 19 and the validation. But, this is a really interesting point that people oftentimes overlook is, starting with the end in mind and knowing that one day you want to exit that business. How do franchises trade versus startups in similar industries, that are not franchised? And there was a study done by the Rinker School of Business recently where they looked at 2,000 businesses over a decade that, were like kind of industries, both franchised and non-franchised. They found that those that were franchised traded at a multiple 1.5 times those that were not franchised. And so I think that was really eye-opening for those that have been exposed to that study to show that, potential resale buyers see the value in having that partner on the sideline in the franchisor.
I often wonder, John, too, when an entrepreneur is considering buying an existing business through an acquisition, I'm always curious how many businesses out there have those systems and processes in place, because that's franchising, right? There's a strong system, there's an operations manual to follow. And I'm always curious, how many of the businesses out there actually have those operations manuals in place, or they're just acquiring the business and now they have to figure it out for themselves.
Exactly. And even within franchise, not every franchise is created equal. And it really is key to go in, eyes wide open, ask the tough questions, and understand what differentiates the winners from those that, aren't going to, exceed 100 units one day, let's say.
Yeah, and I guess I'm sure you like, the branding aspect of it too, John, is that, franchising, not in all cases. I mean, there's always stronger brands. Like you said, not all franchises are created equal. I mean, some have stronger brand names or brand recognition, but it's nice to start off with some type of brand recognition and even some history behind the business as well. That's certainly an advantage, isn't it?
It is, and I'd say in food, branding comes into play even more so. I think it's more important, but I'd say in some of these industries out there, I mean, can you name an insulation company? Probably not.
Right.
I'd say brand awareness isn't always as important, but it's still, obviously, if there is brand recognition, that helps, but oftentimes when you enter a new market, and we're doing a lot of deals with emerging brands right now that are still in the process of building that brand, but they check the boxes so well in all these other categories, the franchisor and their background, maybe with other franchise systems and, that model. And, I think it's quality insulation, using the insulation example. They went from, 5 locations 3 years ago, and Scott Morris built that to over 250 territories today.
Wow.
I think they're the largest insulation company out there. So, catching the wave of and they're sold out in most markets. You can't get into it in a lot of major cities, but catching it early on before it becomes that next big thing.
I know, you've helped several dozen clients purchase franchises this year, John. Maybe you could talk a little bit about, who they are, maybe a little bit about their backgrounds and even like what types of businesses they're buying.
Yeah, no, I think that can be helpful. Just off the top of my head, we recently had dentists in Orange County, California, by the largest fenced-in rail franchise in the country. No background at all in that business.
Wow.
We had a small business owner in Florida expand his portfolio recently with a non-medical drug testing business. Talk about being Amazon resistant and COVID resistant. That's always going to be needed. We had a professor at the University of Arkansas that was looking for a side hustle, and she got into a fitness business that caters to those 15 and above, which is a growing demographic that cares more about their health than ever before. We've been working with a lot of medical professionals, a whole lot of doctors. We've recently done deals with doctors in all different types of industries, but, just kind of expanding the portfolio of what we're talking about here. We had some recently in Philadelphia, not too far from you. Buy into the oil change business, bought 3 locations up there. And sometimes you'll see complementary purchases, like we had a real estate broker here in Atlanta where I am recently that purchased a property management franchise that's very complementary to what he's currently doing. But, from a Wall Street attorney outside of Boston buying a gutter business to an engineer in Indianapolis buying a business coaching business, we've been doing a lot of businesses, and I'd say in kind of these non-sexy, cash-flowing, understandable segments, people don't want trendy. They want those understandable businesses that are going to be built to last.
What's it like when you're meeting with them, John, for, some of these people for the first time? I mean, do they have any, preconceived notions? I mean, what's that experience like for you? I mean, are they just saying, I want to get into a franchise, but I don't know? It just seems more difficult today to buy a franchise just because there's so many more systems here in the United States than there was maybe 15, 20 years ago, So, I mean, what's the experience like when you first meet with them?
Overwhelming, especially if they've done some research. But, when they come to me, they really look at us as the expert and say, hey, guide us. We are open-minded. I'd say probably 3/4 of our clients say, hey, we have no idea what we want to get into, but we know that, you've got a track record of getting people into successful businesses. We do have some that will say, hey, I really want to stay in the health and wellness space. That's my background. Or, hey, I really like the services space. Don't want to get into brick and mortar. Maybe property services would be a big fit. So, we can start drilling down and peeling back the onion, but I encourage people to stay open-minded. And I'd say probably 80 to 90% of our clients end up in a field that they never thought they would be in. I think about, we have a couple of female clients that are running concrete paving businesses, parking lot maintenance. Never was that on their radar. But they stayed open-minded. They love the culture, behind the franchisor's leadership team. They love the profit model. And they just, the recurring revenue nature, things that I love seeing. This is what makes our job so fulfilling, is when they end up in something they never thought they would. They fall in love with it. And then when they come back and buy additional locations, I'd say probably 70 to 80% of our clients within the first 12 months will come back and buy additional locations. And for me, that's where I get the validation, just seeing their successes.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to kind of piggyback on, John, because I'm always curious, is their motivation in the beginning, is it just that one single unit, or are they looking at, are they looking at the big picture?
I'd say probably a third of my clients will start with one location. Probably a third will buy 3 locations. That's kind of the magic number. And, in a case like that, you would start your marketing typically in a few zip codes, let's say it's in the services business, and then kind of expand over time and, have that development plan where they get into territory number 2 and number 3, maybe 6 months, 12 months down the road. And then a third of our clients will buy more than 3. We've done a couple of deals this year that have been 7 territories or 10 territories, and that's aggressive. We've got another one closing next week that's 7 territories down in Florida, and in this case, it's two doctors that are coming together and buying a business in the property services space. Again, that boring style business is what they want. They want nothing to do with health and wellness. They we understand that we want to diversify, but so no, I'd say many have that approach. But then I think like my client Nathan in South Carolina, we'll do a deal together every year. He's the largest franchisee of 2 Men and a Truck moving service, and he's built a small organization. He operates out of 10 different locations in the Southeast, and he's a great guy, 40 years old, young guy. He'll find a young guy in his church or in his community that he'll bring into his business. They prove himself, and he says, "Hey, go make us proud. We're going to put you in charge of another business." And so every year we'll do a deal together. We've done some in the trash space, we've done some in the property services space, and in each case he comes back and buys additional locations. So so he's expanding within a given brand, but he's also expanding the number of brands and building that portfolio. And quite a few of my clients own existing businesses, maybe non-franchised, and they come in and say, "Hey, I'm for the next thing, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I'd like to add a franchise business to the portfolio." So we definitely see different approaches. Everyone's got different psychology, but most of the people we work with are looking for that long-term growth, whether it be through one or multiple brands.
Do you find, John, that most of your clients are they involved in the day-to-day operations, or are they playing more of that role of the manager and leader of that franchise?
I'd say in the past, probably 60% were looking to leave the corporate job, leave their current role, and run the business full time. I'd say that has shifted now, and probably 60% of our clients are looking to be that semi-absentee owner. Some will start out semi-absentee, get it going on the side, put a manager in place day one, and then eventually, leave their day job and join the business. Others will start out running the business day one, and then over time look to put a manager in place, and then they can move on to their next thing. So, different strategies around that. Everyone's situation is certainly different, and what their financial position is, and whether their spouse is working. Let's say, there's definitely flexible options with most of the brands we work with. And something that we added in this past year, Marty, that I saw as a need was the biggest concern of clients of ours was, if they were going semi-absentee, oftentimes they didn't know who would run that business. They've got to put a lot of trust in that manager running the day-to-day operations. And so we actually brought a recruiter partner in that we've got an affiliation with now that works nationally that can help our clients find that general manager. So that was a huge win to kind of help them in a unique way. And something that I remind people that with franchising, the nice thing is the burden doesn't fully rest on you to manage the manager. Right. Now, ultimately, the buck stops with you. End of the day. Sure. But the franchisor is kind of your partner, and that manager can go to the franchisor and their support team for any technical issues. They're going to help keep them marching in the right direction. So it really is kind of a tag team approach to managing the manager.
Are there industries, John, and you don't have to answer this question, but are there industries that you're kind of like partial to, or that you particularly like, when researching all these different franchises that you've worked with in the past?
Yeah, I've certainly expanded my horizons. We work in everything from automotive to property services to pets, kids, aging population, things that people are willing to spend money on regardless of the recession, in the markets. But I'm definitely partial to the property services. That's where I put my own money. I property services from that angle, but then also as a franchisee, I've invested in different franchise brands on the franchisee side myself. So, it allows me to speak with that experience with clients. And I think there's a lot of great options out there. People, again, want those non-sexy businesses. So fortunately, we've got a great portfolio of types of businesses that fall within that people are getting into.
That's great. And I know recently, John, you did these, it was like a video series for the Global Entrepreneurs Organization on really, I guess, all things franchising. What were, if you could talk about this, like some of the highlights that, can help our listeners?
Yeah, I'd say we cover a lot of the same things that we cover in the book, so I won't repeat those, but something that's a little different. We also talk about from the franchisor standpoint, with the Entrepreneurs Organization, you do have a lot of companies that have, they're all doing north of $1 million to be in the organization. We've got a business in there ourselves. But oftentimes they're looking to scale and what is that right path forward. And franchising is certainly not right for everyone, but I love seeing more and more industries kind of open up to franchising. And, and so we get into the pros and cons of franchising your business. How do you maintain control? How do you, the benefits of using other people's money and the scale of the business where they've got skin in the game. It checks a lot of boxes. We also talk again about the exit strategy. Private equity is all about franchising, and I'm just seeing more activity on the acquisition side, franchisor level than ever before. So we hit on that as well. So I'd say that's kind of the differentiation between that and the book. With that, but no, we've had a great response to that video series, and appreciate you asking about that.
Yeah, no, it's great to talk about that exit strategy, John, isn't it? I think I mentioned to you the last time I interviewed you. I got into a business a long time ago, and in the beginning everything was great. We're talking about everything we're going to do, but when the business kind of came to an end, we didn't have an exit strategy, and we're like, now what? What do we do? And it became, you can only imagine, it was a very big mess. And franchising does that is, it allows you to ask those important questions. You say, what's the end goal, for what we're looking to do, so there's certainly, all those advantages to franchising. Maybe you could provide some closing thoughts, John. I'm curious, what's next for you, as far as, it seems to me you love doing what you do, and I sense that it's the joy you get from this job as well. It must be very gratifying. I've had several instances on my show where someone said, I listened to your podcast, and today I'm a franchise owner. I was like, oh my God, just from listening to the podcast. It must be an amazing feeling for you when that happens, isn't it?
It really is. And just, again, seeing the successes down the way of people coming back buying additional locations, referring their brother-in-law, just that relationship, and it changes people's lives. It really does.
Right. And
granted, I want to be candid, not every situation works out. But again, I'd say the vast majority of our clients. We did have one where it didn't work out, and, maybe we get into that in our next episode. But for everyone else, they're still in business, doing well. I love seeing the successes. So, as far as what's next for me, I am in a season of saying no right now. I'm already trying my hardest to say no to shiny objects if there are shiny objects out there.
Right.
And, excited to have the book out the door now, but staying focused on helping others get into business ownership. We've been busier than we've ever been. I think we're up 50% this year over last year, and last year was a record year. So definitely, it gives me a lot of encouragement for our country too. You see negative news, you see the politics on the ground. Entrepreneurship is alive and well, and we've never had so many people reaching out. So staying the course there and hoping to help many more as we head into 2023.
That's terrific. How do our listeners, John? Go ahead.
Yeah.
I was going to say, how do our listeners get hold of the book, John? Do they go onto Amazon? Can they go to a website? And all your additional services that you provide. How do they get hold of you?
Yeah, come out to FranBridgeConsulting.com and fill out our, contact information form. We'll make sure you get a copy of the book, in a digital format, whether it be audio or PDF. We'll great. Also, reach out. I'll have my assistant ask, if you'd like to have some time on our calendar to sync up. So that would be option one. Obviously, you can go to Amazon as well. We've got the print, the Kindle, the Audible version will be out there in the next 2 weeks once Amazon releases it. So all profits go to charity. They all go to Hope International, a great organization supporting entrepreneurs around the world. So, know the proceeds are going to a good cause. But, would love to engage. Would love to provide a copy of the book either free or through Amazon. And, look forward to helping.
That's terrific. Well, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed talking to you again, John. I'd already like to invite you back over the next year or two, because you're always growing in the industry and always doing all these different things. So I would definitely love to have you back in the future. And I'd like to also wish you a very happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you as well, my friend. Appreciate you having me on.
This has been my pleasure, John. And we'll be right back with more franchise interviews. Coming up on segment 2, you're going to hear what every franchipreneur needs to know before buying a franchise. We're going to play a clip from our popular Great Quotes in Franchising podcast right here on Franchise Interviews.
Franchise Interviews, an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship.
Through our website, franchiseinterviews.com, where you can hear and read interviews as well as get tips from some of the most successful sources in franchising.
And our weekly franchise radio show, where each week you get to hear a new interview with franchisors, franchisees, franchise authors, experts, and attorneys. And don't forget to listen to our podcast, Great Quotes in Franchising. For more information, go to franchiseinterviews.com or call us at 610-905-2919.
That's 610-905-2919.
Hi, everyone. This is Marty McDermott, the president of Franchise Interviews, and welcome to another edition of Great Quotes in Franchising, where each podcast you get to hear a great quote in franchising. Well, one of the shows I strongly recommend listening to if you're an aspiring entrepreneur is Stop Riding the Pine. And the show is hosted by Jamie J. And Jamie is an amazing interviewer. He speaks with entrepreneurs on a variety of topics. And I had the pleasure of appearing on Stop Riding the Pine. And one of the topics that Jamie and I were focusing on were key elements to successful franchising. So this particular clip of Great Quote in Franchising, we're going to call this There's No Creativity in Franchising, and we're going to explain why. What do I want this franchise to do for me? Why are you considering getting into franchising? Because, a lot of times people that get into franchising, Jamie, I think probably should not get into franchising. They'll go into it for the wrong reasons. Well, they'll see the success of one franchise and they'll say, God, I wish I owned one of these. But that doesn't mean that they should necessarily buy into a Dunkin' Donuts franchise. And sometimes they go into the wrong franchise opportunity. So they might be suited for a franchise, but they're getting into the wrong franchise, So I think you really have to be open, to all the different categories that are out there. Again, going deep within yourself and asking yourself, what do I want this franchise to do for me? If you don't want to work on weekends, then don't get into one of these like children franchises where they're real busy on Saturdays or Sundays. So you have to say, what do I want it to do for me? And you ask yourself those deep-rooted questions.
Perfect. I think that's huge. It's very important for people to not jump into something.
Absolutely, because it's expensive too, Jamie. I mean, a lot of times, you're signing a 10-year contract, which is 10 years of your life. It's a long time, isn't it? I mean, it's
oh my gosh.
Like, I won't compare it to the sanctity of marriage, but sometimes it goes further than that, I mean, having that 10-year commitment, so it is a very big commitment financially. It's a big commitment. I think you have to have the support from your family, whether it's your wife and your children, because the first year, typically, from what I've learned in doing this show such a long time now, is it takes a long time to get it off the ground. Even if it is a Subway franchise or a very recognizable brand name, you're still going to be putting a lot of work into it. So you might be missing that time from your family. And sometimes people get into franchising for the wrong reasons as well. Maybe they'll have a bad day at work, and they say, "Oh, I hate my boss."
I'm out of here.
I want to be my own boss. And again, franchising may not be the best alternative for that type of person. There's so many different types of levels of entrepreneurship. Franchising is just one. I mean, you could just initially start your own business where you get to be the creator. There's no, I hate to say this, but there's no creativity in franchising sometimes. I mean, you have to follow somebody else's creation, and that's okay for some people. For me, it wouldn't be. And I assume in getting to know you over time, you might have trouble with that as well, because again, you like to create.
I couldn't get outside of the structure, but I understand why that would be a good thing, because
exactly
they've been there, they've done that. You won't make the same mistakes that the original franchisor made, because they found the solutions along the way, and that's part of the attraction for franchise.
Exactly. I published. It sounds like I'm bragging, Jimmy, but I just got one of a paper published in.
You deserve it.
A journal. If you'd like to hear that whole interview with Jamie J of Stop Riding the Pine, all you have to do is go to stopridingthepine.com. and you can hear the whole podcast. And lastly, we just want to thank everyone for making this podcast such a big success. It's hard to imagine that we've been doing it now 10 years ago. It was one of the things I was talking about with Jamie on the show, is the longevity of the show. Is, what started out to be a 1-month project turned out to be 10 years. So I just want to thank everyone for listening to the podcast and making it such a success. So thanks, everyone. We'll see you again soon with another edition of Great Quotes in Franchising from Franchise Interviews. Take care, everyone.
Franchise Interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews.